accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Board of Adjustment of the Township of Franklin has been provided. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Betterbid. Ms. Grauman asked to be excused. She's ill. Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. McCracken.
Here.
Mr. Rich.
Here.
Mr. Shepherd.
Here.
Mr. Caldwell.
Here.
Mr. Rosenthal is away on business. He asked to be excused. Mr. Reese.
Here.
Ms. Brigalo.
Here.
Chairman Thomas.
Here. Before we start, I would like to say thank the board for your vote of confidence in reappointing me as the chairperson, particularly in absentia. I'd also like to welcome new board members and the reappointed board members. I always like to think this is probably, as far as I'm concerned, the best operating board in the township with the, and it is that way because of the difference of personalities and backgrounds that people have, and it remains that way in spite of its leadership. So we'll move on. Minutes of the special meeting, October 31st, 2013.
I move the minutes.
Second.
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. Reese.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Special meeting, November 13th, 2013.
And I'll move those minutes.
Any second?
Second.
Mr. Betterbid. I'm sorry, he's not here. That's a good one. Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Rich.
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. Reese.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Regular meeting, December 5th, 2013.
I move the minutes for December 5th.
Second?
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Rich.
Yes.
Mr. Reese. Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Resolution, Snyder ZBA 13-00019.
Let's see.
I move that resolution for ZBA 00019.
No.
I thought I heard a second.
We get a second? Okay. Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Rich.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yes.
Mr. Reese.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Wild Heart Bulk Land Supplies, ZBA 13-00016.
I move the resolution for 00016.
Second.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Rich.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. 1340 Hamilton Street, ZBA 13-0003.
I move the resolution.
Second.
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. Reese.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Discussion. We have a voucher for Mr. Bradshaw, February retainer, $865.
Bob, we have.
What about one more? We got Center School, the Center
School.
Oh, I'm
School.
sorry. Getting a little too quick here. Center School, ZBA 13-00022.
I move it.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Rich.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes, I guess I just wanted to be sure we paid the lawyer. All right, February retainer, $865. Various matters, 11/13 through 12/05, 2013, $165. I need a motion.
I move.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor to pay the retainers?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. In the hearing section tonight, Robert and Francis Brunig, ZBA 13-00023, hardship variance in which the applicant is proposing an addition at property located 37 Radio Court, Somerset, Block 259, Lot 21 in the R20 zone. That's carried to March 6th, 2014. No further notification required. The Jewish Home and Health Care Center, ZBA 14-00001, minor subdivision. Applicant is attempting to perfect their property boundaries, included in a prior board application at 330 Demont Lane, Somerset, Block 386.07, lots 5403, 5405, 5502 in the R20 zone, also carried to March 6th. Legal notification is required.
Is that the application?
And the hearing for tonight, Diamond Investor and Builders, ZBA 13-00023, hardship variance in which the applicant seeks to build an approximate 2,360 square feet, two-story, single-family dwelling, 57 Ray Street, Somerset, Block
Hi.
155, lots 17 and 18
There you
in
go.
the R7 zone.
Take
This was
matters into your
carried
own
on
hands.
January 9th with no further notification required, and go right ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Lanford appearing on behalf of the applicant. As you indicated, and I'm trying to get, this is an application for the construction of a single-family dwelling at 57 Ray Street. The house that we are proposing to construct is a house that is 29 feet wide and 42 feet deep, or 2,091 square feet. The property is located in an R7 zone. We are here this evening because we are seeking 4 variances. The variances that we are seeking are lot area. The lot in question is 5,000 square feet. The zone requirement is 7,500 square feet. We are seeking a frontage variance. The existing frontage on that lot is 50 feet, and the zone requirement is 75 feet. We are also seeking a building coverage and impervious coverage variance. The building coverage is 23.6 feet and 23.6%. And the requirement is 20%, and the impervious coverage requirement is 30, and we are at 32%. There is a little bit of unique history to this property, and I think it needs to be on the record. This property, at one time, consisted of lots 15, 16, 17, and 18, which consisted of 10,000 square feet. It was a conforming lot, and it was owned in 2000 by an individual named Davis. In 2004, this individual named Davis sold lots 15 and 16 to a individual named Conteh, C-O-N-T-E-H. Never obtained a subdivision, just sold off the 2 lots with the house. Thereafter, lot 15 and 16, the lot with the house on it, was sold via sheriff's sale to a bank. And then in 2011, that lot was sold to its present owner. Lot 17 and 18 remained in the name of Mr. Davis until he didn't pay his taxes. And then the lot was put up for tax sale. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Paluski acquired it through a tax sale foreclosure in 2012. And then my client contracted to buy the 5,000 square foot lot from Mr. Paluski, unbeknownst to him, the history of this property. So he now is the bona fide good faith purchaser of 5,000 square feet of vacant land. That is the lot we're seeking to build a house on. As is required by law, one of the things that we are required to do is to see if we can eliminate the variance. In order to eliminate the variance, we offer to sell this vacant parcel to the owners of lot 15 and 16, and also to the owner of lot 19. I prepared letters to both property owners on on August 14th, 2013, and sent those letters to the property owner, certified mail return receipt requested, and also regular mail. I do have copies of the letters, as well as the certified mail receipts acknowledging receipt of the letters, and I received, or my office received, no response from either of those property owners. I would offer those letters into evidence.
Okay, so I will mark your letter to Mejia as A1 and letter to the Realty LLC as A2, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Bradshaw. Couple other housekeeping matters, so I can make this application move along fairly quickly. In support of the application, we prepared a plan by a PE named William Scott, which is part of our submission, which shows the property with the proposed dwelling and the variances. As a result of the submission of that application, there were various staff reports that were generated in conjunction with that application, including an engineering report, Mr. Ross's report, Mr. Chee's report, and the Sewerage Authority, and I reviewed those reports with Mr. Scott, and we agreed to comply with all the conditions contained in those reports. There were minor things that were requested. We can comply with each and every one of those conditions. There was also a request for a sidewalk. We will, in fact, put the sidewalk in. We are requesting a waiver of curbing since there is no curbing in the neighborhood. And also to forestall Mr. Shepherd, one of the questions that Mr. Shepherd always asks, part of our submission is a rendering of a house, which is a two-story house that consists of a garage, kitchen, living room, and dining room on the first level, and 4 bedrooms on the second level. If the board were to grant the variance, that is the house we intend to build. Having said all of that,
So you will agree to make that a condition of any variance that's granted?
that is correct.
Okay.
So that leaves us with really the issue of the variances themselves, and in order to hopefully obtain the relief that we are seeking this evening, I need to present some planning testimony, and I would call as my witness Mr. Pesolano.
Sir, if you raise your right hand for me. You solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you'll need to use the microphone. Can you spell your last name for me?
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Michael J. Pesolano. Last name is spelled P-E-S-S-O-L-A-N-O.
Thank you.
Seated, Mr. Pesolano. Mr. Pesolano, what is your occupation?
Licensed professional planner and licensed real estate salesperson.
Are you licensed in the state of New Jersey?
Both those licenses are in the state of New Jersey.
Can you give the board the benefit of your educational and professional background?
I'd be glad to. Although we're close to Rutgers, I got my planning education at the City University of New York, Hunter College, way back in 1983, Master of Urban Planning degree there, and got my license in professional planning in New Jersey in 1984 and have been practicing
I think you've
the planning profession.
provided enough for this
since then.
application.
Okay.
I was
And,
just getting to the good stuff.
okay.
I appreciate the relief on the background.
Okay, Mr. Pesolano, in order to provide testimony this evening, what kind of preparation did you do and what kind of work did you do prior to coming here this evening?
My investigation into this application as to whether it warrants approval included looking at the application materials, the review memos of the various departments of the community, the zoning ordinance, of course, and master plan for Franklin Township, conference with the application team. I also reviewed the neighborhood in several different ways, remotely and on foot, and prepared my analysis.
Can you briefly describe, and I went over part of why we are here this evening, but can you briefly describe the application for the record, please.
Yes, this is an application for 4 different types of zoning relief requested to facilitate construction of a single-family dwelling in a zoning district that permits single-family dwellings. The application falls short on township requirements in 4 key areas. One is lot area, where 5,000 square feet is provided, and 7,500 square feet is required. 50 feet of frontage is provided where 75 feet of frontage is required. The building coverage requirement is set at 20% in the R7 district. This application proposes 23.6%. And finally, the impervious coverage limit is 20%, and 22% is, 30%, 32% is proposed.
Okay, now dealing with the first 2 variances, we talked about the lot area and the lot frontage. Are they C1, C2 variances? How would you characterize those variances?
I see these as a classic C1 situation. The lot's size and frontage are what they are. Nothing is being done to propose that deficiency. They exist in their present form. And as Mr. Lanford indicated through his presentation of attempts to acquire or sell property to render this deficiency better, no help was available, and we are left with appealing this part of the application to the township, as there's nothing else to do at this point. Classic case of hardship where the lot could not be built upon, but for granting of relief in those 2 areas.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
How is this?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
The other 2 variances are, you indicated, are for the coverages, and those are being created as a result of the house that we are proposing on the subject property. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And when you looked at this property and you looked at the area and you looked at the neighborhood and looked at the proposal, you looked at it both with your hat as a professional planner and also as a realtor?
That is correct.
Okay. And did you reach certain conclusions with respect to those variances? And can you indicate to the board what you found around the subject property?
Yes, thank you for the background, and I will go through in as detailed manner as I can without beating it into the ground. The essence of this application being a good fit for the neighborhood. That is where I start, and that is my conclusion, that this application warrants approval. The 2 proposed variances that are tangible things that we can deal with are the coverage variances. And my client has proposed a design for a single-family dwelling that is slightly over those 2 coverage areas. And I say slightly because that's exactly what it is. We're not dealing with a huge increase in the coverage that's proposed to accommodate this new home. But the real strength of the application lies in that very fact, that it is new housing for the township, new housing for a family to move in and be part of the family, be part of the community, excuse me, be part of the economy of the Township of Franklin. The application doesn't just rest on that, though. Any developer could easily have proposed a much larger dwelling to sit on this property, and we would be here slugging that out. But I believe my client has very conscientiously chosen a design that is a good fit in terms of doing a great deal to trim down what might otherwise be a large proposed home on a 5,000 square foot lot. And I say he's done a good job because what's in front of us to discuss is an application that has no setback variances whatsoever. And to me, in my 30-plus years as being a planner, that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of visual impact. If an application carries with it setback deficiencies, and in the worst case, severe setback deficiencies, those things are noticeable right on the ground and are things that need to be reckoned with. This application is clean of any setback deficiency, so that to the trained or untrained eye, looking at the dwelling, if approved and erected, there would be no perception of deficiency because it comports with what the Township zoning ordinance says should happen on the ground. And it provides for adequate light and air and spacing between buildings in the manner that is expected to occur for all residential development of this type. So moving forward, it has that momentum going for it. Now, we're coming down to the key part of this application, which I expect there to be some dialogue on, which is, why not a smaller house? It's not that much over on the coverage in either regard, so why not, if we're starting from a clean slate, just go with a smaller building? The dimensions are what they are on the lot. A home to fit on this lot could be a 3 or 4 bedroom home, or it could be a 2-bedroom home. It could be a 1-bedroom home. In my experience, new housing generally aims for 4 bedrooms and above to make it worthwhile for the builder to do it in the first place. The marketplace is also demanding that sort of new construction. People, in my awareness, are generally not recruiting builders to build them 2 or 3-bedroom homes. They're starting with the idea that 4 is where they want to be, and 4 is a strong number in the marketplace in my experience as a real estate salesperson. Furthermore, this application has merit on a more macro level, and by macro, I mean big picture. The location of this neighborhood, fairly adjacent to the City of New Brunswick downtown area, warrants a very careful consideration of what goes on the land here. A tiny building could be erected. A one-bedroom home could be erected. But would that really be serving, I ask myself in my analysis, would that really be serving all of the interests that are afoot here? And by all of the interests, I mean that this site is in a planning area 1, according to the State Development and Redevelopment Plan. Planning area 1 is where it is expected that infill residential development be channeled to and encouraged. Why? So that it takes advantage of the existing public investment in infrastructure within those areas. It takes advantage of not just the pipes and the roads, but also the transit system that make urban areas work. And speaking of work, the occupants of this new dwelling would be presumably employed in the workforce in this workforce region, this labor pool region. And so it is important, it is a public interest, quite squarely, that this property be utilized for the fulfillment of the need to have good housing, new housing, reasonable housing resources within proximity to employment areas, employment centers, such that the difference between 3 and 4 bedroom is significant. The data indicates that for this particular zip code, 0888703, there are 2.6 people per household. That says that there are families in the area, and we can expect that there will continue to be so, such that a home that will accommodate a family that grows into place, or either comes with it or grows into place, participants in the workforce in the area, have a decent home to live in for a good long while. So it does matter what starts out on the ground to receive this new family into the community. The difference in percentages for the two different types of coverage deficiencies are de minimis, in my opinion, and it's not to make them seem insignificant. I understand fully what coverage means. I have been the author of numerous regulations dealing with coverage in my day, so I understand the concept and don't look at it lightly. However, this lot will be receiving a home of some sort, one way or another, but because of its situation, its position, its location in the community relative to what's around it, it makes perfect sense to me to utilize this lot to the fullest for the purpose that it was intended without going overboard. And I don't think this application even comes close to going overboard as far as the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance for the township. Township decided that 20% building coverage and 30% impervious coverage was appropriate. We are generally on that number. And further, the facilities that are provided with this new dwelling, particularly the collection of the roof runoff and disposal on site, makes the impervious coverage issue squarely dealt with, in my professional opinion. That brings us down to the merits of this overall size of the building footprint. The zoning ordinance would have a 1,000 square foot footprint on this property. But to do that, the design that's in front of you would lose an entire room on each floor of this home. And again, I return to the significance, the public benefit that's attained from utilizing this property in a reasonable manner that doesn't overdo it. This is a reasonable blend of those concepts and actually quite a handsome dwelling to look at. And it fits within not just what I've been talking about, but also the physical features of its setting really are an interesting setup for a building like this to be constructed on this lot. And by that I mean, I did a walking survey of the neighborhood, starting at the subject property and ending there. And I'm struck by the verticality, if you will, of the buildings on either side of this lot. They're vertical. They are a little taller than the 1.5-story or 1-story capes that dot the landscape around it. And that's significant because it provides context for a full 2-story building to be incorporated as new housing in a neighborhood that is going to see attempts to upgrade the housing over time, either sooner or later. So this new building has those kind of vertical elements built into it. In particular, if you look at the front facade, you can see the bay windows on the right side of the plan, creating that vertical element right within the building facade itself. That tracks well with the gable end of the building at 55 Ray Street, and it also tracks well with the vertical features at 59 Ray Street. Further, to the rear, there is a full 2-story facade for the building that's, on Wyndham Place, right behind this lot. So all around, the 3 buildings that frame this lot already have that kind of additional height to them that would make a smooth transition for this lot to go from vacant to occupied with a 2-story building, in my opinion. In addition, the home on 55 Ray Street, lots 15 and 16, is very close to the lot line. That's an existing condition. The design of this home, this proposed home, provides for the more generous yard area to be oriented towards that property, and the more narrow yard area to be oriented towards 59 Ray Street. And it makes sense to do it that way because that provides for an even centering effect. It's not dead center between the two buildings, but it creates spatial arrangements that are compatible with what is found in the neighborhood. Not so much tightness as this per se, but it is found on the streets that are perpendicular to Ray Street in quite regular fashion, according to my analysis. So it's not unusual to see buildings arranged this way, but again, we're not talking about side yard variances. These are conforming side yards. But what I'm bringing it up for is that the design, the siting of the building on the lot tries to work with those surrounding conditions very well and does a marvelous job of that, I think. I've seen a lot of designs that don't even get close to working with their context, but this, I am comfortable saying, does do that. So now, I would declare that these coverage deficiencies are warranting relief pursuant to C2. In other words, it's a better planning alternative for accommodation of the proposed home for the following reasons. Number one, it's going to provide new housing that will better meet the need for such housing than a fully compliant dwelling. This site is in a PA1 area, which is supposed to accommodate infill housing and support the infrastructure around it. This proposed home will enhance the neighborhood without impairing the existing character for the reasons I just finished describing. In my opinion, as a realtor, a smaller home would be less marketable to families that would likely contribute one or several persons to the local labor force. And the demand is strong for four-bedroom, single-family homes, let's face it. People are looking for that in the marketplace, and this would respond to that demand. I don't think it's a surprise that when the National Association of Home Builders did a survey of people who were looking to buy homes and who had just purchased a home, 50% of them said they would like to purchase a new home. So when we talk about a new home, it is indeed a benefit meeting a need in the marketplace. That's a very staggering statistic, in my opinion.
Just one last question. When you did your survey of the area, are there any other newer homes in the area?
There is one new home that I observed at 55 Juliet Avenue. Substantial home, but it fits nicely on its lot. That, to me, is a sign of things to come. This is a neighborhood where the housing is aging. It's not blighted by any means, but the housing is aging, and our society, our culture, would like to have larger living spaces, and that's why we see additions go up, that's why we see tear-downs happen, and replaced with larger structures. It's not just for profit's sake, it is because people want to have that much living space to occupy their home with.
And do you have an opinion, given the fact that there is one newer home already constructed, and if this home were to be constructed, what effect new homes have on an older neighborhood?
It would have a positive effect. And again, coming back to the analysis comparing this with a smaller home, the impact is good with a smaller home. It's better with the proposed size home that's on the plans in front of you. It's just that much better. Four-bedroom homes command a higher price in the marketplace than a three-bedroom home. That benefits not just the seller, but it benefits the surrounding neighborhood with that extra increase in appreciation value that's gleaned from being near a new home of that type.
You have outlined many of the positive reasons why you feel that the board should grant the two coverage variances. Do you see any negatives in the grant of those variances?
Well, I gave a pause there and took a breather, and that was not the end of my positive
Okay.
reasons, or the benefits, I should say. In that vein, the master plan has a very clearly stated goal of encouraging infill housing, and I think this would advance that goal very directly. As I said, the deficiencies would be difficult, if not impossible, to perceive at the street level. They're very minor in their nature. Coverage deficiencies, to my trained eye, would be, I would not be able to see 180 square feet more coverage than should be. And that's what we're talking about, 180 square feet more on the ground than the ordinance is wanting to permit. That could only be perceived by doing a calculation, in my opinion, not looking at it. Even if you had the opportunity to hover over the property, you would still not be able to discern that that was a violation without doing the measurement. And that says to me, it makes for a good fit. It's not out of character with the surrounding homes when you look at the footprint from the aerial views that are now commonly available. There is compatibility. The proposed dwelling, because it meets the side yard and front yard and rear yard requirements, would provide adequate light and air, very basic purpose of zoning, the purpose of the municipal land use law. And it would not generate any unusual pollution, traffic, or noise any more than any other single-family dwelling would do. The impervious coverage deficiency is due in part to complying with the provision of adequate off-street parking, another public benefit. When the parking is kept off the street and on site, everybody wins because it reduces the opportunity for congestion to the extent that treatment can do. Doesn't eliminate all circulation issues in a community, but when you have your parking on site, you're doing a lot.
Wouldn't that size house normally have a two-car garage in this modern age?
This has a design that provides for two parking spaces, one behind the other, which is less convenient than side-by-side parking, but for an area that is in close proximity to a highly urbanized area, this is a good fit kind of design. It utilizes the minimum amount of paving to get the parking on site and taken care of. RSIS recognizes the one behind the other for single-family dwellings being compliant.
Now, is the applicant building this house to live in or building the house to sell?
Although it is totally irrelevant to the application, my client is a builder, and he is not building it to reside in. But the issue before the board is not who's going to occupy it, but whether we have proven our case for the variance. Just, again, very quickly to move along.
One other comparison, if I may, Mr. Lanford. I'm sorry to do this sort of staccato, but I want to get it all on the record. I did an analysis of the 20% coverage rule on a conforming 7,500 square foot lot, which is what zoning calls for in this neighborhood. A maximum size home that complies with the 20% coverage rule on a 7,500 square foot lot would result in a 1,500 square foot footprint, which is quite a bit larger than the 1,180 square foot footprint that is proposed here. We're dealing with a neighborhood that is not so tight with dwellings corner to corner that inserting a dwelling of this modest size would create any kind of perception of crowding, in my opinion. There's adequate open space around it to accommodate it and absorb the home without the perception that something wrong has happened. Now, I would like to move into the negative criteria, unless you have
Fine, please do so.
some comments on proceeding. In my opinion, there really is no detriment to the surrounding area from this proposal. Again, one needs calculation to get to the conclusion that a violation would even exist, in my opinion. The deficiencies would not be readily perceived by a trained or untrained person looking at this dwelling, in my opinion. And also because of the physical treatments that have been incorporated into the design, I find that it would be a compatible fit into this particular setting, this particular neighborhood. The review memo prepared by Mr. Healy asked for some data to represent what's going on in the neighborhood in terms of what the lot sizes are doing, and I'd like to present an exhibit that does that. I'm going to keep one copy. There should be nine there for distribution.
Bradshaw, may I mark out exhibit A3?
How many pages?
It's one page.
One.
Okay.
While Mr. Lamford is passing out his exhibit, I have a question for our attorney. There's something of the line in the either in the reports, it must be in the reports, where it says, "Is this an illegal subdivision?" It seems to me that it is.
Well,
What is the effect of that?
I think it was, for sure. I mean, the person that ultimately buys this property, I'm sure they're going to do a title lookup, but it's my understanding, and your town representatives can tell me better, that the town has accepted what has gone on so far and redrawn the tax maps. And so I want to answer your question from the board's perspective. I think you can look at it as clean two lots for your perspective and see if they meet the required proofs for the application that they seek. I wouldn't get so involved in the history of it. I don't think it prevents you from acting on it.
In other words, if we act, we won't be wasting our time.
I don't think you will be. They have to kind of explain the back history of it, but it's coming to you clean. I don't see how you can hold this purchaser, because it has gone through different levels, and I guess maybe Vince and Mark can give you some more color as to how the town accepted it.
Yes, I
like
noticed
there's
some language
hands on both.
and they were describing the history that made it appear as if this was a bona fide purchaser for value without notice.
Yeah, I mean,
Who, my client?
Yes.
My client was a bona fide purchaser for value without notice. That is accurate. As a matter of fact, the township accepted the deed to lot 15 and 16 which was when the illegal subdivision occurred in 2004, and accepted that deed and carried lot 15 and 16 as a separate lot since 2004, and issued separate tax bills to both of those properties since 2004. Perhaps, you can always Monday morning quarterback, but perhaps when the deed came into the township in 2004, somebody saw it was only for 2 lots, and it used to be 4 lots, a flag should have gone up. It didn't. But again, then it went down the chain where for the last 10 years, it was carried separately, and also the vacant lot went up for tax sale by the township for non-payment of taxes. And when they went up for tax sale, they put up for tax sale the vacant lot, not the entire parcel.
Okay, good. Now, with regard to this exhibit, I'm just looking at it. Lot 50, Ray Street 53 and 55, those are the 2 properties we're talking about, are they not?
That's correct.
Okay, Just wanted to be sure that I understood that.
Well, actually, 55 and 57.
Okay.
So just to brief the board on what this exhibit represents, it is an analysis of surrounding properties around the subject property, including the subject property, that identify the size patterns in the neighborhood. And I organized it by street so that it could be more easily absorbed that way. And that's my opinion. Maybe you don't see it that way, but I'm struck first by the idea that in this immediate neighborhood, there are three lots of 50 feet wide, 50 by 100, excuse me.
Yeah, but two of them are the ones we're talking about here. I'm not so sure that I get
One
really
is
excited about that.
One is the one we're talking about with this application. The other one was part of the
All right.
old subdivision that should have been. So in terms of context and compatibility, you probably couldn't pick a better place to be developing a 50-foot wide lot with a new home. This location is the right location to do that because it is a constrained situation. There is no way to provide for more room. The site will eventually accommodate a dwelling, in my estimation, and it works with the neighbors being equally situated. What I'm also struck by in this analysis is that, and by my walkthrough of the neighborhood, is that there is not a cadence of house, 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 house. Rather, there's house, house, some yard space, house, 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 some yard space, house, yard space, house, house, house. It's not a regular kind of pattern that we're talking about, particularly on Race Street. But also in the surrounding area, you can see that there are three columns, not fully populated evenly, but still indicating that there's a variety of lot sizes, and that is the characterizing formula for this neighborhood. There's a variety. And so this new home would just be adding a positive, polished finish to that variety by providing new housing, thereby encouraging more improvement in the neighborhood in doing so. There are three properties that, in the left-hand column, I've put parentheses around with footnotes at the bottom. All of the X's represent lots that are either exactly 5,000 square feet, exactly 7,500 square feet, or 10,000 square feet and larger. The two, I apologize for mixing that up a little bit. 5,000 and 7,500 square foot lots exist except for 88 Eugene Avenue. That's a 5,998 square foot lot. 29 Wyndham Place is a 9,500 square foot lot instead of a 7,500. And 43 Eugene Avenue is a 12,502 square foot lot instead of a 10,000 square foot lot. So I appreciate Mr. Healy's prompt to provide some data. I think it was useful for this analysis for me as well as the board. So it is appropriate information to contend with. But after having done so, I'm even more convinced that it's an appropriate proposal to approve because of the context of what this represents. Now, in finishing with the negative criteria, I've described that that there is not a detriment, in my opinion, to the surrounding area. That's prong one of the negative criteria. Prong two deals with the master plan and zoning ordinance and the intent and purpose of each of those documents. The master plan, in my opinion, seeks to continue to accommodate new residents into the community moving forward. This proposal is fully consistent with that vision by providing a new home in an appropriate setting with compliant setbacks in all directions. The adjacent home that is very close to its side lot line will be given proper consideration by the placement of the larger side yard between it and the new dwelling, thereby advancing the intent and purpose of the Township Master Plan and zoning ordinance with regard to spatial arrangements in residential neighborhoods. That's S-P-A-T-I-A-L, spatial, instead of special. And so in conclusion, I find that the application provides substantial public benefit by helping meet the demand for new housing in the community of the type being offered by my client while producing no substantial detriment to the surrounding neighborhood or the zone plan or the zoning ordinance. Thus, the benefits substantially outweigh the detriment and meet the C2 test and warrant your approval. The application, for those who are concerned with the purposes of the land use law, meet purpose A, which is the promotion of the public good by providing new infill housing in a planning area 1. Advancing the state development and redevelopment plan is actually a purpose of zoning, so it does that. Purpose I, promotion of a desirable visual environment. This is a handsome new home, I think, and will be a nice addition to the neighborhood. Again, encouraging continuing upgrade of the now aging housing stock in that neighborhood. And finally, it'll promote the efficient use of land. This is seeking reasonable but optimal use of property that is appropriate to be used optimally, in my opinion, with no perceivable detriment. And that indeed is a public benefit.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions of this witness.
Any board questions?
I have a couple. In the surrounding area that were you able to get any idea of how many bedrooms were in these houses at all?
I wanted to find that so bad, to have a handle on that.
Yeah.
That data is just not available.
Okay, and you also mentioned that the houses in this area were 1-story or 1.5-story capes, is that correct?
Largely, not every one
Okay,
of them.
and what distinguishes a 1-story cape from a 1.5-story? Is it the dormers?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I have to ask you a question, which is a little unusual, but it comes to me because you're both a planner and a real estate broker. Do you have an interest in diamond investors and builders?
None whatsoever.
Okay, good. I didn't think you would because you came with Mr. Lanfrit, but I had to ask.
That's a great question. Thank you for clearing that up.
I don't know who answers this question. I'll just address it to Vince. There's a deck on the back of this house. Does that deck play into either the issue of building coverage or impervious coverage?
Not unless it's covered. If it becomes covered, then it's both impervious and lot coverage. Uncovered, it's neither.
Okay, all right. That's it for me.
Other questions?
I just want to state that you really can find out the number of bedrooms by going to the tax assessor's file, that they have that all on file when they review every house.
Any other questions?
I have a question. How much square footage are we talking about that you're over on building coverage and lot coverage?
180 square feet.
180. So,
That's for the building coverage.
That's correct.
And then impervious, it's 420. Does that sound right?
Yes, it does sound right. Yes.
and so what would the house look like if you were to, I don't know, shrink it a foot on the length and shrink it a foot on the width?
It's possible to keep shrinking a building down to make a fit, but my review of the plans suggests that that's not a wise thing to do because even shaving by a foot causes you to lose the functionality of at least one room. In its raw form, 180 square feet represents a space roughly 8 by 10.
No,
let's just say.
this board has approved numerous houses of smaller size to fit appropriately on a lot to meet those. So I think you're saying that the house is less valuable. It doesn't mean that the house can't be built or won't be functional. This board has approved many such undersized lots of houses that were much smaller, that developers built and readily sold and people moved into. So I think
Yeah, I'm having hard,
I don't understand that
I don't-
comment.
the lot is 5,000 square feet. A compliant house would have a footprint of 1,000 and a total square footage of 2,000. I find it hard to understand why a 2,000 square foot house would not be functional.
I
Can you-
did not say it wouldn't be functional.
How
I
would it
am,
be less than optimal? Other than your client's desire to have to sell a four-bedroom house, how is this, from a planning perspective, better than a compliant 2,000 square foot house?
it is that much more home in a key area of the community to meet the whole that the community represents. We don't just provide housing for the sake of providing housing. People live in that housing, they become firemen, they become teachers, they sell bread, they do their thing economically that
They
keeps the
can't do that if they live
community.
in a three-bedroom house?
If we built a one-bedroom tent, it would be occupied by one person.
Why are you
That's
talking a
not,
one-bedroom?
that's not my argument at all.
Could a three-bedroom house, can you have three bedrooms in a 2,000 square foot house?
Sure.
And why are you mentioning a one-bedroom house?
I'm doing it for emphasis because we're having a
You
debate
talk- you have
about
to speak facts.
which is a better house. And I'm telling you, in my opinion, because of this location, because of these circumstances, the public benefit is better for a four-bedroom home to be put here rather than a three-bedroom home. It's that simple. I'm not trying
I
to
would think a very
do anything other than
persuasive-
demonstrate that.
I think a very persuasive argument could be made that you need a variety of housing. You need large homes, you need one-bedroom studio apartments, everything in between. So, the argument of that it's a good fit, that it's infill per our master plan, that it's infill per the state, the fact that it's in the state planning area, the fact that it could be housing for police officers and teachers, all of those things could be equally accommodated with a compliant house. And I don't think any of those couldn't be accommodated by a compliant 2,000 square foot house. So I'm having, other than,
What's funny about this?
have you done an analysis of what the existing, you did an analysis for the lot area. Did you do a similar one for impervious and building coverage percentages in the area?
No.
Okay, so you don't have any quantitative information about whether the existing character of the neighborhood is one where the homes are exceeding the coverages?
I have my professional opinion, but I know what you're looking for. You're looking for data that backs that up, but I don't have the measurements of coverage to offer you.
When the board has had similar applications, they've received quantitative data to back it up, other than just an opinion.
Well, my analysis doesn't rest on the idea that it looks like all the other houses. That's not why I'm representing this application as warranting approval. I'm taking a look at the composite whole of building community. And I say that not out of disrespect for the opinion of the board's professionals. I've been where you are. I have written many a scathing memo about things that don't comply. I understand the roles that each individual has to play. My role in this seat is to weave together a story that needs telling. This is an appropriate location for housing that would not be perceivably out of whack with any of the regulations that the township has. Again, you would have to.
I think you just proved Mark's point. You said in conformance with the regulations that the town has, and you're not in conformance with two coverages. So I think your whole point is, yes, if it's in conformance, but it's not, and I think Mark is making the point that basically what you said is that we want another bedroom, we want to make it bigger, but Mark is saying he hasn't heard anything from a planning perspective that justifies granting it 4 versus 3. I don't understand it, and his board typically has gotten different testimony. And like I said, we've always tried to get to the point where it meets every possible coverage so that it fits in with the neighborhood, and here you have an opportunity to do it. You're not talking about a 3,000 square foot lot where you have to be over because you have to have some type of house. You can easily put a functional house that, there's hundreds of them all over town, that maybe have one less bedroom that don't require the variance. I think that's Mark's point.
Maybe need to come back to us with the missing data of the area. I mean, the other houses in the area, but as we've had before in testimony.
For the sake of what you're...
This chart means nothing to us.
Well,
Or show us a house that
Yeah.
meets the coverage requirements.
well, in response to that, Mr. Dominic, when we did receive Mr. Healy's report on dated November 21st, I asked my client, and this also goes to answer Cheryl's question of, well, can we make the house a foot smaller? We can make the house smaller. The net result of what happens is you lose a bedroom on the upper level because you can't get 4 bedrooms. You would have a huge master bedroom across the front, and the rooms downstairs, although the same number of rooms would exist, would be smaller. My client did go back to Mr. Druga, who was the architect who submitted the plans that are before you, and did ask him to scale out a house that would meet the coverage requirements. I do have copies of that plan. If the board would like to see it,
Yes.
I would be glad to share it.
Okay, so I'll make that a 4.
I don't think I have enough copies.
Well, Pete, if you're gonna share these, is this a consideration?
You only have 2 bedrooms.
The consideration is the board's consideration. Quite frankly, my client, through his professional, feels that the larger house is appropriate. If the board says, no, build a smaller house, he will build the smaller house. We've asked for the variances. If the board decides not to give the variances for the coverage, the house that we are showing to you now would meet the coverage requirements in the zone, and my client would build it. Again, his professional and my client does feel that
But we'd still need the frontage variance.
those, whatever you build,
Right.
you need the area and the
Okay.
frontage variance.
Yep.
Well, if I could, just because I have a few other questions. You had mentioned the issue, or that your opinion that the character of the neighborhood was one of verticality. I have to tell you, my impression was actually the exact opposite. When I look at, and I did this right before the meeting, right across the street is a ranch.
This is the
I guess to the back left is also a ranch. The corner of Eugene and Ray, both sides on the same side of Ray Street, are also ranches. The corner of Wyndham and Eugene, which touches the back corner of this site, was a 1.5-story building. The one in the back that you characterized as a 2, I think it was a cape, I believe, with dormers. I would characterize really more as a 1.5. The property to the right next to this site, and also the next one over to the right, I would also characterize as 1.5-story, more than 2. And sometimes it's hard to make that distinction when a cape has dormers, but the overall gist is that the overall character of this neighborhood, in my opinion, is not 2-story buildings. It's mostly ranches and raised capes. So my impression of the neighborhood, which speaks to the whole issue of, this is a 2.5, it has the appearance of a 2.5-story building. So the issue of coverage and the fact that this is a lot that's smaller than is required, I think that goes into the whole issue of fit. So that's my opinion that I'm giving to the board. So my question with regard to the coverage issues, so it's your opinion that the coverages that are proposed are appropriate. What other improvements, after this is built and there's a future homeowner, what other improvements would reasonably be expected to be made by a future homeowner?
You're talking about accessory structures
Yeah.
and
What is
the
a
like.
normal, somebody moves into a house within 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, what would you expect a homeowner to want to do to their property?
Some add sheds, some don't. Some add pools, some don't. Some put a patio in, some don't.
Okay. And what happens, what would happen to the coverage figures, both building coverage and impervious coverage, if that were to occur?
There would be overages.
Okay.
But that is a hypothetical situation, not our proposal tonight.
Well, I think
Not
it's
if
a
they put in a
reasonable
pool.
consideration for the board because it is something that is inevitably going to happen. A homeowner is going to want to put a shed, a pool, a patio at some point in the future. So the bottom line is,
Well, Mr. Healy,
This-
with all due respect, there's a deck already proposed on the plan, so I don't know if people add patios and decks. I don't know if this is an area, especially since we have to put dry wells in, that you can put a pool on that lot, so that can happen. So I think,
technically, you can't store stuff just in the garage because that goes to your parking requirement.
right, but we also have a basement for storage, and well, I would dare say that in a one-car garage, you can still store a lawnmower, rakes, and things of that nature.
I think it goes without saying, and frankly, working in the zoning department, I would be shocked if this house was to go up and within some reasonable period of time, there's going to be further improvements as everybody makes to their properties. So this property is going to be back before this board as it's proposed.
And then the board can decide whether to grant or not grant a variance should that case happen in this case.
But you're asking, basically, you're asking the board to grant a situation where they know the homeowner, it's extremely likely that homeowner's going to have.
But that should not be the basis of the board's decision, whether somebody may come back later and ask to put a shed
When
on.
they're asking, when you're asking for variances, and one of those variances is for, well, actually, three of the variances speak to that. One is the fact that you have less lot area than is required, so that speaks to that issue. And the fact you're asking for building coverage and lot coverage due to the size of the house. So you're creating that situation, and you're asking the board to approve.
So if we reduce the house to 2,000 square feet of footprint, then we meet actually, the one I propose is, the alternate proposal is actually significantly less than that. But there's no guarantee that somebody may not want to come back in the future and do something, but we would then bring the house under the 20% and 30% with the smaller house.
One of the things, though, in line with what Mr. Healy is saying, by reducing the house to 3 bedrooms from 4, you might conceivably be reducing the need for some of these other improvements. Maybe there is a need for less storage. 4-bedroom house may accommodate another person who needs an additional car where there isn't a space for it. There's going to be, in theory, there'll be less people in the house, correct?
Correct. I don't necessarily disagree with Mr. Healy. I also don't necessarily disagree with the opinions and conclusions of our planner. I think I can, having done this long enough, I see merits in the arguments of both Mr. Healy and also of the planner, and I guess it's really the board needs to make the decision. My client has, again, looked at everything and actually did come up with a plan by the same architect, and that architect has appeared before this board previously for a slightly smaller house, which would eliminate those variances. And if the board feels that, in its mind, the smaller house is more appropriate or most appropriate for the site, my client would accept that board's decision and would move on. Again, my client felt and his planner felt that the larger house was appropriate, but intelligent people in looking at these issues could have differences of opinion.
Does the,
Mr. Chairman, How do we go forward in deciding which size house to vote on and approve? I mean.
Well, we can make that decision.
Yeah, do we have enough information for the smaller house at this session? Or do we need any more?
There's still variances involved with the smaller version, so.
But those variances do not deal with the house. The house is the house. Those variances would be, as the planner says, if it was a one-bedroom house, those variances would exist.
Right.
What the smaller house does is eliminate the variances for coverage, which were the concern of Mr. Healy in his report. So we can eliminate those variances. We felt that we thought the house we were proposing was better, but if Mr. Healy or this board feels that the smaller house is most appropriate, then we would be glad to build it and honor the board's wishes.
We can still deal with the application, just
Yeah,
designate which version you're
Yeah.
putting into the resolution.
I would be inclined to go forward and recommend based, I'm only one member of the board, but the three-bedroom house, which meets more of the size of the lot and reduces some of the variances that are needed than the four-bedroom house. So that's my view. I don't know what the rest of the board's view is.
I'd be inclined that way.
Okay?
Do we have
We'll go back to,
Cheryl had a.
if there are more questions for the planner?
No, I think Pete has
Is the
audio.
planner your sole witness?
My planner is my sole witness.
Then we'll open to the public. Is there anyone who wants to ask a question or make a statement based on the testimony or based on your opinion of the application? Then we'll close to the public. Any other board discussions or?
Okay. Just very briefly, I think I sort of went over what the board's options are. I did do an analysis, or did have my engineer do an analysis, and if the board were not to be persuaded to grant the approval for the larger house, and the smaller house was more in the line of the thinking of the board, then the net result would be we would be reducing the impervious coverage to 19.2, I'm sorry, the building coverage to 19.2%, which is under the 20% zone requirement. We would be reducing the impervious coverage from 30 down to 27%. So we would be then bringing the house under what the zone requirements are. And as Mr. Shepherd pointed out, the other two variances, whether we're building a 1, 2, 3, or 8-bedroom house, those variances exist, but we can eliminate them if the board has a preference for the smaller house, and those would be the percentages, and we would not be seeking those variances if the board wanted the smaller house.
Okay. Anything from the board?
Unless someone has a different idea, I'm going to propose a resolution for the three-bedroom house.
Exactly.
Everybody on board for that? Okay.
As represented.
Oh, yes, right. I move that we grant the applicant the area and frontage variances that will allow them to build the house set forth on Exhibit
A4?
A4 for property located at lots 17 and 18 in Block 155 on the maps of the Township of Franklin.
I assume you have no problem if we decide to reverse the garage from one side or another, as long as the house is the same?
As long as the house is the same house that's
Okay.
in that is pictured in A4, it doesn't bother me one way or another whether it's on the left or the right. I just don't want to see a house that's made out of red brick or some other material that doesn't match up with this house.
Now, it will be the house, as I indicated earlier, that what we represented with the original plan, we represent with this plan, but my client may want to put the garage on one side versus the other.
I can understand that. Thank
Well,
you.
and we don't care what the interior compartmentalization of the house is.
No.
They may be able to get 4 bedrooms within the conforming footprint, or a den or whatever. So just the exterior.
Yep. And anything, and I don't think we have to add anything to that resolution, that's pretty simple.
Do you want to add the square footage which is on here, this 1,677?
No, I think if we've identified the house that we're giving a variance to build, I think that's enough.
Okay.
But I'll ask our attorney what he thinks.
I'm sorry, I was flipping through the.
Do we need to identify the particular square footage of the house in the variance, or simply by referring to the plan? Will
Well-
that do it?
We're not giving them any variances other than the size of the lot. So-
Right. Okay, right, size of the lot and the frontage.
Yeah,
Okay, good,
so they got to conform,
right,
so.
Okay.
I don't need to get to the,
And then we need a second.
I second.
Any further discussion? All aboard.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. McCracken?
Yes.
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd?
yes.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Reese?
Yes.
Chairman Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if there's no further business.
One thing, Mr. Chairman, the meeting in 2 weeks on the 20th will be canceled.
Okay. Entertain a motion to
If
adjourn.
the meeting's canceled, do I still get credit for coming?
In your case, yes, you were here half an hour early, so you get credit for the next
Right.
meeting.
You're free to show up anyway.
All right,
With that, meeting adjourned.
yes.